Look at the weather all morning, and Sarah can give us a forecast of how it's going to look for the rest of the weekend. Morning. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Put things into perspective. Got a text here from Mike on the Isle of Harris who says, if you want to escape the deluge elsewhere, we've had no useful rain for weeks. The ground is parched and cracks. The streams and waterfalls have dried up. Our water supplies are threatened. We are thinking of the rest of you, he says.
Thank you very much, Mike. Now, it is the largest music event BBC Radio 1 has ever staged. 100,000 people will make their way to the Hackney Weekend Music Festival, one of many cultural events celebrating the Olympics. Our entertainment correspondent, Lisa Mazimba, is there. You are ready to go and get a cup of coffee, I think. Thanks very much.
I know how he feels.
We can't hear him anymore. We're just talking about, Usher was talking about sort of dreams and how you should look after children. We'll be talking about childhood dreams a little bit later. Lots of us don't live up to our dreams in our childhood, but we've got Chelsea Healy here. Who did? She wanted to be a dancer and an actress, and she is.
And be on Strictly. It all came true. How do you make sure your dream comes true? Coming up in the programme, we're looking at England's dreams, their hopes for the quarter-final match, and dreaming of better weather. We'll have the full forecast in 15 minutes.
Stay with us. We'll have the headlines in just a couple of moments. Hello, very good morning to you. This is Breakfast with John Kay and Louise Minchin.
Are we heading for the worst summer on record?
Near the fan zone in Kiev this morning. And have you seen more fans turning up there, Ben? Oh, thank you.
In other news, a former coach at one of the biggest American college football teams has been convicted of sexually assaulting 10 boys.
Jerry Sandusky, who's a big name in American sport, was found guilty of 45 offences at a court in Pennsylvania. He now faces a possible sentence of life in prison. Syria has admitted shooting down a Turkish fighter jet over the Mediterranean. A search.
Here, Jimmy Carr faced his first audience last night since the Prime Minister called his tax arrangements morally wrong.
The comedian has been at the centre of a row over his financial affairs throughout the week after it was revealed he'd used a legal scheme to minimise the amount of tax he pays.
We have news for you this morning of a great UK victory. A British dog has triumphed in the annual World's Ugliest Dog competition held in America. Me or Icky and Mugly look quite similar to one another.
I think they're the same type of dog, aren't they?
The ugliest type of dog. The time is 11 minutes past 9, and we'll have the weather forecast with Sarah Keith-Lucas in a few minutes.
Around 450 homes were flooded last night in the northwest of England, and the town of Todmorden in West Yorkshire was cut off by floodwaters. Now they are facing a major clean-up operation today.
We're joined by Pete. And Pete, you were saying around 450 properties flooded. That is a lot of properties, isn't it, even by the standards of the last few weeks?
It is, and there's
to Sarah, but of course you've still got a lot of water up in the hills that's gushing its way down. So for the next few hours, for you as the Environment Agency, what are your key concerns, and where are you most concerned? It's 14 minutes past 9. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. The main stories this morning. Also coming up in this morning's programme, we're going to be live.
About that all-important weather. Sarah's here again. Morning.
Good morning. Well,
thank you. Now, as we've been hearing this morning in our other main news, a computer failure at NatWest, RBS and Ulster Bank earlier this week is continuing to cause disruption for thousands of customers.
And lots of you getting in touch with various questions this morning. Let's put some of those questions now to the direct.
Thank you.
Let's turn our attention to this the other main story today, that 450 homes have been flooded overnight in the northwest of England. We've seen the town of Todmorden in West Yorkshire was cut off by floodwaters.
Of course, this morning they are now facing a major clean-up operation, and Nick Ravenscroft is there for us.
Nick Ravenscroft, thank you very much indeed from Todmorden, and we'll have updates throughout the day on that flooding in the northwest of England on BBC News.
Now, in yesterday's programme, we looked at calls to force elderly drivers to retake their driving tests, and lots of you got in touch to tell us how concerned you are about your relatives driving on the road.
Yes, Mike Robinson emailed us to say how worried he was about his elderly mother driving on the road. He even stopped travelling with her after 2 terrifying car journeys and asked his GP for help, but was told there was nothing that they could do.
Well, Mike, I had a busy week. Those were the words of Jimmy Carr last night as he faced the crowd at his first gig since the Prime Minister called his tax arrangements morally wrong.
Our reporter Colin Patterson was at the show in Stockport, and we'll get his verdict on it in a minute. But first, let's hear what some other members of the audience had to say about the performance.
Of how he dealt with it all.
Well, he dealt with it right at the start of the show. He came on stage and said, "Thank you very much for coming out. I've had a busy week," at which point there was a heckle from the bow.
The issue long term for him career wise is whether this just evaporates and leaves him, or whether he's sullied by it for the foreseeable future, for the bigger audience?
Well, the gig was in...
You are watching Breakfast. We're here with you until 10 o'clock this morning on BBC One, when, of course, James Martin and the Saturday Kitchen take over.
So let's find out what James has got on the menu for us today. Hi, James. What have you got? Thank you very much indeed. Coming up in the next half hour...
Hello, very good morning to you. Watching Breakfast with John Kay and Louise Minchin.
The time is 9:32. Let's get a summary of this morning's main news. And up to 500 properties have been flooded overnight as torrential downpours swept across the northwest of England. Most of the report has ended with the former coach of an American college football team being convicted of sexually assaulting 10 boys over the course of 15 years.
Syria has admitted shooting down a Turkish fighter jet over the Mediterranean.
Jimmy Carr faced his first audience last night since the Prime Minister called his tax arrangements morally wrong.
And finally, an ugly dog. A British dog has triumphed in the annual World's Ugliest Dog competition in America.
He's got a Mohican.
He's got more hair, that's why he didn't win.
Yeah.
Those are the main stories for you this morning. We'll have the weather, of course, for you in about 15 minutes' time.
Let's, though, look to the sport. Busy weekend, and Mike is here looking ahead to England tomorrow, and of course to the Germany game last night.
Well,
which
first of all, in England, the build-up started, hasn't it? Interesting, though, that already Roy Hodgson has managed to lay 2 ghosts, hasn't he, really? The inability to beat Sweden in a competitive match, and also the inability to beat a host nation in a major tournament away from home. They've done both of those. They
Only
can.
a few more ghosts to go.
Well, exactly. Got Italy and then perhaps Germany, although can anybody see anybody beating the Germans? Not me. I tipped them at the start. I think they'd even be too much for Spain on current form. That's where we start. Yeah, good morning.
It's just coming up to 9:45. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. The main stories here this morning. Flood warning. Let's catch up on that all-important weather. Sarah can have very much for all your help this morning. Sarah, see you later. Thank you.
Now, do you remember those Radio 1 summer road shows that went around this country and on the seaside? Well, things have changed. The Radio 1 event this weekend is the biggest thing they've ever staged. 100,000 people making their way to the Hackney Weekend Music Festival, one of the many cultural events that are celebrating the Olympics.
And our entertainment correspondent, Lizo Mazimba, is there for us this morning. Morning, and you've got the sunshine, Lizo, I'm glad to see.
He's a busy man. He's got to make use of the time. Now, they were talking there in Tim Moffat's piece about Usher trying to inspire kids to live up to their dreams. And we're going to continue with that theme now, because can you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up? A fireman, maybe, or a zookeeper? I think I fancied being an astronaut, which hasn't.
I wish I'd been a doctor.
Doctor? Do you still wish you'd been a doctor?
Bit late now, yeah. When it comes to deciding on their future career, children are often told to reach for the stars. But according to a recent poll, the majority of us never manage to see those childhood dreams become a reality. Well,
we're joined this morning by what they want to do. Let's ask Chelsea then. So, 15 years ago, have you been sitting in your classroom and breakfast crew had turned up and said, Chelsea, little Chelsea, what would you like to be when you grow up? What would you have said?
When I was in school,
You're very modest, but I mean, it's also down to talent, isn't it? Did you know that you had a talent for these things before you wanted to do it, or did you have did the talent show itself and then people were encouraging you to...
See, I can't...
Yeah, it was mentioned earlier on, but you've got to have talent to do that. So it is a combination of having talent, I guess...
Whatever you choose to do in the future, I'm sure it'll come true.
And that's pretty much it for breakfast this morning. Thanks very much for watching with us.
Yes, tomorrow morning the Olympic torch is going to be here in Salford. We'll be here with it and some special guests.
See you then. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.